This one is all about people. Now, as you know from my presentation this morning, people is one of the 4 elements of how we've defined a business playbook. And this session is going to be all about managing people and actually why managing people is so hard. I've spoken to so many people that want to start companies and they say, if only I didn't have to work with anyone else, then I would definitely be an entrepreneur. I'd definitely start a company. And I think people are really the turning point in going from just kind of a job for yourself to really building a business. So we're going to talk to some amazing leaders here and get their take on how to manage people and why managing people is pretty hard. It's a hard part of building a company. All right, so let's dig in. We've got 3 amazing panelists that just joined the conversation. First is Kevin Marasco. He is the CMO over at Zenefits, a company I'm sure you've heard of. And he literally wrote a book called People Operations. He's a marketing executive, super passionate about building solid teams. Kevin started at Zenefits after working in marketing at HireVue, Talio, and more. Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Great event and appreciate you hosting it.
Thanks. Great to see you again. All right. Next, we've got Devin Bramhall. She's the CEO of a content marketing agency called Animalz with a Z. Look it up. Super cool. Animalz went from 18 people to 100 in the last 3 years. That is scaling. She is a people leader that's passionate about storytelling for career advancement, and I can't wait to hear what she's got to say. Hey, Devin, how are you?
I'm getting the hang of unmuting. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Okay, and then third, we have Andrew Chau. He's the co-founder and CEO of Boba Guys. Andrew's passionate about building things that bring cultures together, and that's exactly what he's doing at Boba Guys. Such a cool brand. Hey, Andrew.
Hello. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. Super excited, Chris. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right, so let's get into it because we've got a lot of road to cover here. I would love if the 3 of you would just fill in the gaps a little bit for our listeners and just maybe share in a sentence or 2 what your company's all about, how long you've been around or how long the company's been around, and maybe just a rough number of how big the team is today, just to get some context. So Kevin, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So Zenefits, we're a software company. We help small businesses specifically with their people operations. So we provide technology that helps automate HR, payroll, benefits. And the fundamental difference is that we're focused on people and built the software around people, helping enable and empower them and really help deliver a better employee experience while helping small businesses stay on the right side of compliance and manage all the operational aspects of the people. And we're about 400 people, and company's about almost 7 years old.
Amazing. And I think you've still got the building, but there's one in Arizona here that I look at every time I drive downtown. So very cool. Devin, how about you?
Hey, yeah. So Animalz is a content marketing agency, and we create B2B content that helps companies serve the needs of their audience. And we're really on a mission to make the internet a more helpful place. Sort of, we think that one piece of content at a time, we can really make the internet as helpful as it was meant to be. We've been around for about 5 years, and we're 100 people. And we really, just in the past year, we doubled through COVID. So yeah, growing pretty quickly.
Insane. I can't wait to get into that story. And if anyone was on for Gary Vee's presentation this morning, we talked a lot about helpful content versus spammy content. So people should definitely look into what you're doing.
We have strong opinions about that.
All right, we'll include those. And Andrew, how about you?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. So I started basically it's a cafe chain, but we're vertically integrated. We make everything from the tapioca balls to sourcing our own leaves, getting our own matcha. And we have that in stores across San Francisco, New York, and LA. And we're about 490 people now. It's a retail-based company. So in retail, you have a huge, expansive workforce. We've been around for about 10 years. So last week was actually our 10-year anniversary. So by now, some people know we're kind of known in the beverage industry. So we kind of started a movement. We have our own book with Penguin and Random House. So please, I'm going to plug this book because my agent's going to get mad. Called the Boba book. It's a bestseller. So on Penguin Random House. So people know that what we're trying to do is just change the way people think about, the cafe business. A lot of the trends nowadays come from overseas. even internally. So not just the product trends like matcha or something, but we are also seeing a lot of the internal culture models and how to run a business come from different parts of the world. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So by now, 10 years later, we're a little bit of a combination of East meets West. So super excited.
I love that. So everyone that's listening, you can hear we've got 3 rock stars. Like we could dig into so many aspects of business with these 3, but we're going to try to focus on people operations, managing people, teams. Andrew, how many locations did you say you have?
We have 19 open plus our restaurant group, which would be 24 right now.
Okay, so 24 locations. We'll be sure to circle back to that. So the first area I want to start with all of you is this is such a crazy labor market, and people are talking about, the great resignation, people leaving companies, joining companies, not sticking around for long. So when you want to build a team, the first part is hiring and attracting teams. So I'm curious, like, how are you approaching hiring today, and has it changed over the last year?
I'm happy to jump in. It's Chris, you're right. Like we work with over 10,000 small businesses in helping them with their people ops. And I've been in kind of the HR technology space for about 20 years, and I've never seen, I call it a talent crisis. Record demand for talent, record level of resignations. McKinsey just published some research, and it shows that 4 out of 10 employees plan to quit their job in the next 3 to 6 months. So it's expected to just get worse. And so, I think one of the fundamental things, there's a little bit of a misalignment between companies and employees. Companies tend to think, one thing motivates both attracting and recruiting talent and retaining them. And often it's a little bit different factors that are actually important to employees. So it's not necessarily just like the compensation, the bonus, and what you're paying somebody, or even their job title, but it's more about the purpose of the work that they're doing, the potential of that, and how that fires up an employee and the actual work and the upside. And then, what I would call is like play, the ability to enjoy the work, actually like genuinely enjoy what you do, whatever that job is. I mean, that could be a barista. That could be, an executive at a company, but genuinely enjoying what you do and the impact that work. And, a lot of companies can gloss over like the purpose and the impact that their work has. And so I think that's one of the fundamental things, starting with kind of like the purpose of the work and the passion behind it versus just being more transactional in nature, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I completely agree with that. And I would just like to add, like, the thing that Haley is my COO, when we joined the company 3 years ago, one of the things we noticed was that there was a small group of people and none of them knew how their future would unfold through working at Animalz. They're like, forget getting to the next level of my job. Like, how is this job going to benefit me in the long term? So I think it's really important to, set clear role descriptions and definitions and paths, like show them the vision. They need to see their future through this company. And I think what a lot of people, or some mistakes that people make, is that in trying to keep them, you try to keep them in this ecosystem. What we try to do is say, look, your career will probably take you away from us at some point. Let us set you up for that future. And I think what that does is build loyalty, which has a way of retaining the right people, right? The people who want to stay will stay. And the people who are ready to move on, they will move on, but hopefully they carry that positive image of the company with them and will help attract more people to you, right? Through word of mouth.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn says something about like a tour of duty for people, getting aligned around what's their next milestone, because they probably guaranteed won't be with you forever. But if you can lay out that next step of their journey, it's really helpful. Andrew, how do you think about that with people working in your stores?
Yeah, I mean, retail is super hard. You might have heard that, Kevin and both Devin are super right about finding meaning. I think one of the, I guess, good and best things that have come out of the pandemic is people have really questioned the priorities in their life. So they're like, am I going to be doing this for another 10 years? I have a chance to reset. So, I mean, that happens even in retail. I think a lot of people are like, well, am I going to do something while I'm in college? Our employee base is similar to like a Starbucks or Phil's Coffee or Pete's Coffee. So they're like, am I going to do this? And is it going to help me get an internship? Is it going to help me find a career post college. And so, what we do is there's this term, I think I'm going to echo what both Devin and Kevin said. I'm going to add something too, is that we create something, people are using this in NFTs. I don't want to get super Silicon Valley here, but it's about metaverses, right? So in retail, we think of metaverse. So we think of it the same way as like an ecosystem, as we've all been saying. That's my favorite word too, is that, if you don't want to be in retail, we're big enough that's why we actually started a restaurant group. Some people just wanted to be a line cook. They wanted to get in the restaurant business and hospitality business. So if you graduate kind of your college and you're like, I want to become the next, hot chef, you actually can move over to the restaurant group side. So we have had at least 10 transfers over to the other side. We have a warehouse, we have a factory. You can kind of be on the factory side of things. We have a big ecosystem. We invest in a lot of media companies. So we have a lot of interns, especially, that have fed to these media companies that some people know, like Watcher Entertainment or Julie Media, that are amazing. They're very big on digital, and some movies actually. So we have friends, alumni make movies because we're connected to entertainment again. So I think if you see it as a metaverse, then you can still keep them in. It's almost like it was the Rita Hoffman Tour Duty thing, but they're just providing value somewhere else in the ecosystem, not necessarily down kind of the spine of my business. Now they're kind of in the arms and the legs. And if your culture is similar, which I'm going to come back to that, and your values are similar, then you probably are going to get any value from them no matter what. And their value is finding meaning in what they do, right? So they're going to, as long as they align with the mission, in my case, bridging cultures. A lot of people are like, hey, I want to bring, people of color stories out there, or people of color food out there. As long as it's in our ecosystem, they're generally happy. So it's probably more of a retention strategy. Acquisition strategy, real quick, is more than ever, you got to be really creative. Just find ways to kind of, if you have a strong brand, find ways to resonate with people who already follow you. So that's your biggest recruiting tool.
I would also add just being more inclusive in your hiring process in general. We realized we did an audit of our hiring process, I think it was last year, and realized that we were excluding a ton of really talented people just in the way we were reaching out to the market. So that is a huge untapped opportunity as well.
So on that point there, is there something actionable that you'd recommend to everyone listening? Just like a little hack or something you've done?
I don't recommend hacks as a general rule, but I would say that look at there's a lot of really helpful resources on how to write your role description. That's really a first barrier to entry. You can exclude a lot of people just in the way you word it. Also, your hiring process. So the questions that you ask, things like, is education really important? In that respect, we go back to first principles, and it's like, what does education represent in terms of the certain skills or experience we're looking for, and focus on listing those skills and experience versus adding something that's prohibitive, but that people would perhaps exclude some people who have the skill sets and we would want to hire. If that makes sense.
No, that's a great point. Even just looking at how we write the job descriptions, you might not be looking at it from any other perspective and you don't think about it, but just questioning that, I think, is a great idea. So thank you for that. Kevin, we talked a lot about how you can sort of nurture people into different roles in the company by having those conversations with them and painting a picture for them. What in practice is the right sequence or timeline? Like how do you make sure you're having those conversations with people?
I loved Andrew's tour of duty kind of, example. And I think that's great. I mean, I think we need to rethink less about like a job and doing the specific task and more about an experience, and how do we provide new experiences and opportunities for our people to learn, try new things, and help make the company better, deliver value to our customers, and while also, building their own experiences and careers. So one thing specifically I try to do is we do, what I call like an innovation jam, and we get team members together and say, okay, hey, here's, something we're trying to solve for to make this better for our customers. What are some ways we could deliver more value to the customers, or do this task better, or do something more efficient, whatever it is, and no voice left behind. Let everybody, contribute. And then don't stop there with a great idea, put it into action and assign it to someone on the team. And it doesn't matter what level. I try to rotate so that it might be someone who's literally their first job, and they're getting like, early level exposure to, management, if you will, managing a project and a task through. So I think it's less about like the job and trying to provide, opportunities, and that can come in a variety of formats. But I think one important thing is making sure you're, having conversations with employees regularly. You can't do it once a year. You can't, just do it every 6 months. You need to have ongoing conversations to understand each individual, what's important to them, what are they looking to learn, what does success look like for them in the next year or several years, so you can provide those learning opportunities for them. And I think that's an important thing. And if you're not having those conversations and know, hey, here's what's important to this person, here's what success looks like for their time here, then that's when you start to get at risk of losing people, I think.
Yeah. Great points. I mean, I think about our experience hiring people, and there's so many times when we've brought on generalist types of people that we just want to throw into the mix and see where they thrive and let them be curious and let them learn and see where they gravitate in the company. Is that something that you've all experienced too?
I've seen more like generalists, or we think about it in terms of zones of genius. And so what you might call a generalist to us might be someone who is doing a job that they're good at, and maybe they even like for a while, but that doesn't suit them anymore, and that maybe like ultimately isn't their zone of genius, like something that they're really good at and gives you energy. And so similar to what Kevin said, like we're not just like, okay, good, we had our yearly review with you and let's walk away. It's like an ongoing negotiation about their current role and what they're doing in it, and what their future hopes and dreams are. A few examples that we had a strategist who became our head of L&D because we had this need to have a sort of dedicated education department on our team due to how we operate, right? Like we believe in building education into the workplace. So, that turned out to be something that she really wanted to do. And she was someone who was considering leaving at one point. Like she was like, I don't know, like what do I want my future to be? And we turned that into an opportunity. Similar to our director of quality. He was formerly our director of marketing. Our head of R&D started as actually kind of a generalist writer, and then 5 years later is helping us innovate. So I think it's staying present, I guess, with every employee's journey is really important to surfacing opportunities. These people have helped us expand our company, right? Like people talk about growth in terms of revenue, but what about growth in terms of opportunity, and how giving your employees new opportunities can help you grow the company and expand into areas you didn't even think of?
Yeah, it's like every employee is like their own business, and it's all these little businesses that are growing, right? Sorry, Andrew, I think you were about to say something.
Oh no, I just want to echo what Devin said. Can I go a little bit econ here? Because people kind of might know my personal brand in the public is very intellectual.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was a lot of these labor studies right now, and there's like a pull through of kind of labor. What that means is that people are getting pulled up. So a lot of people are questioning, including white collar jobs, where they're feeling like, oh, I don't know if I want to stay in corporate America. I want to chase my dream. It's a great time to kind of start my e-commerce shop, my craft shop. So it's going to pull people through. So what happens is people are actually going into levels and getting pulled up. They're like an assistant manager, and they're like, you know what, you're up. You're going to get pulled up to more of a regular marketing manager or a general manager. Then you also have that in the blue collar industry where you have people, there are a lot of drivers. There's a big driver shortage. There are now drivers that are on the road, like big truck drivers or whatever, that they've never actually been trained and had a lot of experience, but they're getting put on like the harder routes, or, they're getting, in my world, retail, you're having managers that are probably less experienced than ever before because everybody's getting pulled up into a role. Oh, no store manager, assistant manager, I'm going to promote you. So what that means is tactically, we need to build a better way to kind of push people up through a pipeline and train. So we definitely in our food industry, we probably want to have the most robust training processes. We have I come from a very strong kind of culture. My favorite book is Daniel Coyle, Culture Code. Anybody's read that one? Really good. Yeah. And the idea is to create a culture that kind of keeps people always engaged, as everybody said. And as Devin was saying, is that you're trying to pulling people through, you're promising them a career path. And so when you do that, you maybe have a little bit of a productivity decrease, but you might actually still, on the long run, get a 10-year increase. I would argue that the pandemic, when you get them younger or less experienced, if you train them well, put in the better programs. So that's why more L&D, learning development teams, are getting huge now. You're going to pull them through instead of a 2-year tenure. If you get them early in the pandemic, you might get like a 3-4 year tenure because they're growing so fast. And that opportunity of just always learning excites, I would say, a huge part of the workforce. So it's kind of like a pull-through model that is basically based on labor economics.
Training is a huge investment in retention, is what I'm hearing. Like if you can train really well up front and show that opportunity, then they appreciate the training and the opportunity and want to be with you longer. So we see the same thing. Now, a lot of people that are listening, they may be an earlier stage company, maybe just one person, a couple people. And the hardest part is deciding who to put around them. Devin, you mentioned kind of sticking in your zone of genius. So I wonder if you could just like clarify that so everybody that's listening can figure out where they should focus and where they should hire to build their team.
Yeah, great question. So I think one of the things that can be really hard in the early stage is that shift from doing everything to finding other people to do things. I think it's easy to create an identity around the things that you accomplish. And I think it's definitely a mindset shift where you're like, okay, my value is no longer in packaging this thing up and sending it. It's coming up with a structure in which things get done, right? And so I think it's important to take a giant step back and look at what are the jobs to be done? What are the jobs to be done? That's the first most important thing. And then it's who do I have on my team, right? What are understanding from them? Like, what are their zones of genius? What do they like doing? What do they not like doing? Look, it's not perfect. Not everyone's going to do everything that they love to do. So it's a negotiation, but it's like, what are my needs? What are my needs now? What are my needs going to be in the next 6 to 12 months? Because usually depending on how fast you're trying to grow, usually like, a year down the line is pretty far. So, like, what are my needs now? What are my needs in the next 6 to 12 months? Who do I have that can do this? Where can I innovate on process? I think that's a really kind of like forgotten thing where it's like, how can I use software? How can I use, we use Zapier a lot a lot of back end to connect a lot of things. Like, where can I create efficiency? And then, that will start to reveal to you what the roles are that you need.
Yeah, a lot of it's just taking stock of who does what in the business today and where the gaps are, where the inefficiencies are. So, Kevin, I'm curious, I'm sure you cover this in the book, but just when you think about hiring strategy, how far out should people be planning? Is it 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, 3 years? How do you think about the team that I need in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's always situational to the business. And I think, to Devin's point on how fast you're trying to scale, I tend to think within the 12-month window, because just as fast as cycles are shortened today, everything's just moving so much faster and it's just so dynamic. So trying to plan out like further than that, I think you might be, exerting excess calories. However, I do try to have a vision and know, hey, if we're going to go from here to here over the next 12 months, you need to have the vision of, hey, I want to get to a 3rd store, a 4th store over time. So I'm going to like head in that direction versus if I'm just going to keep it at one location, I might think about that a little bit different. So I think it's important to have a longer term vision and kind of be on that path. But as far as like specifically, planning headcount and hiring, I tend to, do it within the 12-month time frame and follow a model similar to Devin. And I like to look at, one thing I'd add is, especially like at an early stage, it's really important to have the right people doing the right things, right? You don't want to go over hire and waste valuable resources on something that might be too premature for you. Maybe that's good in a year. And I think that's a common mistake I see entrepreneurs do early. So I like to look at, okay, what does success look like? Say it is 12 months. What does success look like? What do we need to do? What work and outcomes are needed in order to get there? Then what skill sets and maybe experiences are needed in order to do that work? And then take a look at it yourself or your current team and understand what are the superpowers, like what, and especially if it's like super early startup and it's just yourself, it's super important because you want to know, what am I good at? What do I add value and I'm good at and gives me energy? and then understand, okay, what do you need to complement, right? Maybe something you're not good at that needs to be done. And then that's where you're basically kind of building around you. And that concept, I think, scales, early stage, literally, if it's just me, I'm going to be thinking about that. And then as I get to, 10, 50, 100 people, those same concept, but it starts to, scale into groups of people and then teams, but you can still apply it forward.
So you lead the market.
You brought up the executive thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But there's like that your sort of executive circle is really important. I'm glad you brought that up because, that is where that vision and sort of that like higher level strategy comes from. So having the right people on that like top level advisory board, people that fill in gaps, who think differently from you, who will challenge you. I think that is so important. So just wanted to like echo that and say, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Andrew, if you want to chime in too, who is on the hiring squad, the hiring team casting that vision? What does that advisory team look like at Boba Guys?
Yeah, this is all my favorite part of the discussion. I mean, you're in the early part of the company. It's when you set your culture. You're establishing your norms. You're establishing your rituals, your values. We do a little bit of like, I wouldn't say it's like a Walmart cheer, but we have like certain sayings that we do at Boba Guys. If I implemented that now, 10 years later, people would be like, well, that's weird. Like, well, why are you doing that now? But if you implement it in the beginning, you can get people to kind of do normal, because when they come in, they're going to be like, I guess this is what they do here, right? So you can normalize things really early, and really you're starting with a blank slate. So the team that you want to use to build that are people who are very strong in culture. I think we've been talking about generalists. I'm very bookish. So there's another great book. I think it's David Epstein who wrote Range. So Range is probably one of my other favorite books. It's like this teal book. That's all I remember is this giant range. Anyway, so the idea is that, we're in a world of generalists, right? And specialists are great. I think specialists are when you want to optimize, right? In the beginning of a company, especially a startup, I'm a founder CEO, right? So, when I was a founder, I was looking for people that could be flexible, that aligned with my idea of bridging cultures, that was really good at growth mindset, that was really good at bringing people under their wing, and very low ego. You can't really have high ego people in the beginning of a company, because what you're doing is what you call like satisficing. You're not maximizing, you're satisficing. You're getting to 80% and you got to be okay with it, because you're pumping out MVPs, minimum viable products, and just getting things out to market and just iterating real fast. When you get later stage companies, like now, I have to think about compliance. I have to think about rules and regulations and laws and things at scale. And if it breaks, it's a big downside risk. I have to protect against that. So then now I'm looking for specialists. So I'm trying to maximize more of my departments and domains. So in the beginning, hire people that are strong generalists, that are very strong kind of culture people. So I'm gonna get one more, a little bit tangible though. What do you mean by generalists? What does that actually mean? These are people generally who what I would call have interdisciplinary skill sets. It's someone who's good at, they can do a little bit of statistics and Excel and math and STEM, but are really good at writing. You need people who are really, really good at flexible. My first 10 that I can name, all of them, one is my chief of staff to this day. She just, she's going to business school at Haas, now and everything. She was a strong journalist, but you know what she was by trade? She was an illustrator. She came to Boba Guys as a Bobarista, didn't know what she wanted to do. I saw something in her because I met her parents one time because they came to work, and they're like two executives at like Unilever and CPG, consumer packaged goods. And I said, how are you the daughter of two execs and you go to one of the best art schools in the world? And she goes, I just didn't want to follow my parents' footsteps. And I was like, there's a way to combine both. So as she grew in Boba Guys, I took her out and put her in HQ, and she was one of the first people to do marketing with us, because I was a marketer by training. I was a brand manager after business school. So when you see it that way, then you really understand, all right, I'm making them to a generalist. They're very malleable. And over time, culture is just going to be ingrained, because at that point, they're just another ambassador for you, right? So I think that's the easy part. It's really finding those skill sets where they can kind of switch and wear many hats.
I love that. Our chief of staff, shout out to Chelsea. She was the first person in customer success, the first person in marketing, the first person in like all these different disciplines. So I think it's really important to have those types of people at the beginning. A lot of, I know this session's about management, people management, but so much of what we're talking about is culture. And I'm curious, are there other fun ways that you've infused these activities or something into your company to maintain culture so that people stay connected to the original vision of the company? For any of you.
I love Andrew's, he used a term that I love and think ties as a, neat component of culture and rituals. And I love that. It's the little things and how those manifest and create this employee experience that helps build the culture. And I mean, couldn't agree more on trying to establish that early and so important. So, I think thinking about, especially in kind of a pandemic world where there's a lot of things shifting and, more stuff happening online, how do you, create these rituals and, traditions in your company that represent, that support the values you have. And so I think, thinking about how you can integrate those into your day-to-day activities, just to give you like a couple examples, we do, we have our values and we do, every week in a team meeting, we have kudos. And one person says thank you to another person who helped them over the past week and how it tied to a value of the company. And then we basically keep paying it forward. So we do this every meeting, and then someone does it. Another thing we do is we want to be inclusive. And so instead of just like me running every, marketing meeting, we pass the baton and we have a different leader. We have a shared agenda that we build in Trello. And we actually have a wheel, kind of like a wheel of fortune. And whoever it lands on, that's the person that gets to lead the meeting. And it's great because you get to hear from different voices and their styles and tones. And it's a little bit of a development opportunity for them because they help manage and corral the agenda, put together a couple of slides. And so it's just little things like that that you can do and kind of, help build, your culture and with purpose. You want purpose behind everything. Why do you do this? Because this is, our customers are important. So we're going to, showcase a customer every Tuesday on, this channel or whatever. So just thinking about some of those things, I think they're early on are important.
That's so cool. I want to use the wheel. All right, Devin, sorry.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I think that's where like the mission and values really create freedom for you, because in the early days, like when there were fewer people and we're kind of getting things on the rails, everything came from Haley and I. Like we were the ones to wrap our arms around the company, keep everyone together. But as we grew, we actually saw that us being the only, like the main speakers kind of left people out. And so similar to what Kevin said, like we actually revamped our mission and value. So we had a set of values early on that we then changed last year. And that's, I think, just a reflection of like the change in company and culture with new leadership. But once we set those mission and values, then it gave people a way to engage themselves and take ownership over their own participation, but like with the guardrails, right? So they're consistent, like they're sharing the same idea, the same sort of basic idea that we did. But now, managers, directors, other VPs, like they can take ownership over leading the team and leading engagement, knowing that they're working within the vision that we originally set.
That's so cool that you would change your values far into the company. And I think that's a lesson everyone needs to hear, because sometimes you make those and you just stick to them. And then after a while, they're not really authentic or people aren't living them. And so everyone should feel free to turn over the values if there's an update to the company. So that's a great tip. I want to touch on one more thing before we wrap up here, because I know we're getting to the end of our session. Remote work. This has been, everybody has this now, but Andrew, you had this before a lot of people did, with people working in other locations. So I'm curious how you've thought about this from the beginning. When you can't be in every store at once, how do you make sure that people operate the same way to your expectations?
Yeah, great way to finish. So I think number one, remote work is inevitable. I think the way the society and technology is set up, we have to think about how to accommodate what's going on. So most of my team, including headquarters, we're essentially remote. And we're retail based, which is really hard to pull off. So I'll give you good examples of what we do then. Well, we talk about culture pretty much like in the word of the day. So we have weekly announcements. We call it the Inside Scoop. And my co-founder and I and it's a cute pun, we talk to the camera we put it on a YouTube private link, and it talks about all the updates that we're going to be doing for the week. It's kind of like the morning announcements at school. And I almost treat it like that because every school is like its own classroom, right? It's like its own little micro domain, and it's the same size of a classroom. Every store is about 20 employees. So we do a lot of that, and that's where you can get this disseminated information. But going back to what I think everybody was saying, and I'm going to wrap up here, is that I think in a previous session I was listening in on, somebody was saying that when you create a culture, your values, as Devin said, we also change our values. We change transparency to radical candor, Kim Scott's radical candor.
Yeah.
It was, how do you reinforce that? And you have to live and breathe it. You can say that's your culture, but what do you mean what do you mean by that? How do you codify it? So here's a good example. Something that we do is really the biggest culture divide. I think we're in America, we think about certain things too much as kind of culture, where I think we need to think about kind of philosophy as cultural, meaning Eastern philosophy really is about collectivism. If you kind of study any Eastern philosophy, most of them derived from Confucianism, is about collectivism. It's about the collective, where no person kind of sticks out. It's not about individual rights or anything. It's kind of why Asia ends up the way it is. In America, you ever read, Tocqueville and Democracy in America and all these things, our defining trait in Western civilization, especially in America, is individualism. Sometimes toxic. It's why you can't get people to wear certain things and get rid of it. You think it's about you, it's about the individual. Great for expression, bad for cohesion and social kind of that's why we argue so much in America. So now that's a spectrum. So we teach us something that are related to in Eastern culture, like yin and yang, harmony, like less polarization. So our companies run that way. So we actually cut out the extremes. Some people are going to be like, you know what, that's centrism, right? Especially in today's vernacular. And I'm like, no, if you actually know your political history, it's called pluralism. It's pluralism. It's the plurality has to coexist. I'm not hearing people who don't believe in a pluralism. So I say that. What CEO says that? Nobody says that. I say it in every town hall. So I remind people about the dynamics between individualism and collectivism. So to me, if I see things that are not expressed and they're expressed as kind of like overly collective or overly individualist, I kind of chop it out. And so we've done that over the 10 years. It's why we're really hard to replicate. It's why we never lose people to Starbucks, Phil's, Blue Bottle. They almost always come to Boba guys because they've heard about these. So it's a core part of our book. So that's kind of how it ended. It's like you really have to live and breathe your values no matter what size you're at.
Great point. And actually building on what Gary Vee was saying this morning about and instead of or, and how, you can kind of make your own version of this stuff. Kevin, I see you nodding a lot. Anything to add here in the last 30 seconds?
I love the collectivism. I mean, one of our biggest values is in it together. And it's not about, it's one of the things we recognize, not just what you did, but how you help someone else in the team. And I think the last thing I'd add on the remote work is listening is important. I call employee listening, and what mechanisms do you have to make sure you're listening to your employees? And that's, for example, there's ways you can digitize this too. I use a Slack bot that goes out to my team on different days, and it asks, hey, how are you doing? Like, how are you feeling? And this crazy world we've been in, how are you progressing on your KPIs? What's in your way? And it's just, I have like real-time feedback on that. And there's millions of mechanisms to do that, but it's important to listen to your employees and how they're doing, feeling, and how you can help them too.
I love that. Final thoughts from you, Devin, on the topic before we wrap up?
+1 on listening. That's our first approach. We've been remote for 5 years. So, since the beginning. So, I would say never call your remote strategy done. Keep reevaluating it as the team grows. The way we connect people remotely has changed dramatically from 18 to over 100 people. And I would say the thing that's become the most successful is being open and allowing and creating space for employees to create their own engagement mechanisms, whether it's individual Slack channels or meetups or whatever. Let them tell you and help them execute these ideas. It doesn't always have to come from you.
Amazing. Well said, and a perfect way to build on how you handed the baton for some of the speeches. It doesn't always have to come from us. We don't have to put all the pressure on ourselves, right? So it sounds like the three of you have built incredible, inclusive cultures. I think if I were to summarize this chat today, it's less about the difficulty of managing people. It's more about, creating opportunity growth and creating an incredible culture of intentionality and just listening and being transparent, communicating. So thank you so much for all the tips. The three of you are incredible. So everyone listening, please go look them up. Check out their companies, their brands, their books. These three are rock stars. Thank you all for being here.